Welcome to Men, Sex, and Tantra.
Discover what your parents, porn, and religion never taught you about being a man and having extraordinary sex. I'm Tanya.
And my name is Robert Schwenkler.
And get ready to have your mind blown and your world rocked.
Welcome to today's episode. Tanya and I are going to dive into what is good sex.
We're going to dive into it.
We're gonna dive all up into that. Yeah, we want to talk about this topic that's pretty simple in a lot of ways, but we want to unpack it more deeply. There's so much to say about what is good sex, what is enough sex when it comes to men and sex.
Absolutely. I mean, good sex, that there's that whole thing where they say, any sex is good sex. And let me say that, probably more men could say that than women for sure, because that's definitely not the case. But I don't even think it's really the case for men deep down. Though on the top, if we take the concept of, good sex, is it just sex? Like you got to get your dick wet and now that's good. It's all good. So you ejaculated. It's good. What are the actual things? What things make sex good on a 30,000 foot view level that you had it?
which for, in my experience, a lot of guys, there's a lot of truth to that. And this speaks to this kind of the scarcity piece. This speaks to the scarcity piece that both men and women are experiencing, and men get our side of that picture. Before we hit the record button, we were talking about, so I have colleagues who've had the opportunity to spend more time with and in and around women's pussies than any man could even think was possible, like tens of thousands of women. And I've heard these guys talk about what happens when in a space when female desire is actually opened up, and guys are like, I have no idea what to do this. I thought that I wanted all of this sex, but they just end up kind of feeling overwhelmed by the depth of feminine desire, the depth of feminine energy that's around them. And most women aren't operating in that space or anywhere near that space. Most men have no idea that kind of a space even exists, let alone what it would be like to actually be like, no, too much, save me.
And from the woman's perspective, I definitely have a story on that, because I'm that woman who actually likes sex. And a lot of women don't actually like sex. They like all the lead up, the affection, the connection, the romance up to sex, and maybe even the orgasm. But the sex itself is kind of like the sex is just like, okay, that's all right. And the reason, because most of them have not been fully engorged, fully engaged. So they don't even understand what that is either. As somebody who lives in that world, my favorite thing when I have a partner in the beginning is always like, so what's your fantasy of having, how much sex do you want in a week? And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, just don't know, just gloves off. Like, how much sex do you want in a week? And most of them are like, wow, 3 times a day. And I'm like, yeah, okay, only 3 times a day? Cool. Yeah, we can do that. I mean, they're kind of like, what? And I say, hey, when I commit to a relationship, I'm kind of like, I don't ever say no to sex. Like, if you come to me and you're interested in sex, we're going to have sex. It's going to look lots of different ways. Keep up. And what happens is, it's true. Once you take that restraint off, once you take that barrier to sex off, for most men, the first week or so, it's like, they get to like go, hey, I want sex. It's a test, right? Like, so it's like, okay, great. And so within about the second week, though, I, across the board, typically notice that there's not as much I want sex, right? By week 3, I'm like, hey, we only had sex once today. What's going on? Where's the other side?
Where's the other sex?
Right. I'm the one looking for the sex that we're going to have 3 times a day because I'm like, yes, a man who wants sex 3 times a day. And within 3 weeks to 4 weeks, it's just not there. And then I get the, I'm not a machine. I'm not a machine. I'm like, it's
You thought you
okay.
were.
It's like, yeah. And you know what? That's okay. But I mean, how do you even know that if you've never done it?
And I want to
You
speak
know
to
that.
that I'm not a machine piece, because that's a lot of the socialization that men get. We're supposed to be, the story is that we want to fuck all the time and that we can be ready in an instant. And look, there's a lot of truth to this, but this part of the conversation for me starts to lead into quality of sex. What does it actually mean to have a really high quality of sex? I have the opportunity to put my dick in whenever I want, to have as much sex as I want. What's the quality of that sex? Do I know how to bring a level of depth and presence? And I'm going to kind of meander for a moment, because something that you were saying about always being ready brings up this other point for me, that a lot of guys, in my experience, have at least little clue about, if no clue about. My colleague Joshua frames it really beautifully. He says that, I'm forgetting the exact words, but basically that foreplay never ends. What does it mean to be
Right.
a man who's not just getting what he wants when he wants it, but who's really bringing his presence and his intention to the relationship to keep his partner or partners feeling um, met, turned on, alive, instead of coming and saying, okay, I want sex now. What does it mean to continue to provide this nourishment of male attention, male presence, and be delighting her at all times? Because, and I would be curious to hear your female perspective on this, but everything that I've ever heard from women is that, like, they don't turn on as quickly as men. Women oftentimes aren't physically aroused and engorged by the time that sex ends up.
90 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, biologically, a man is designed to go from flaccid to ejaculation in 90 seconds.
Yeah.
That's the biology, because you don't want to get killed by a predator while you're having sex, right? So there's no such thing as like premature ejaculation when it comes to that. So we can dispel that myth. How long you want to last, you can learn to do that. But if you're healthy and a man and you see something that attracts you, you can be instantly aroused. A woman can actually go from non-arousal to arousal in about a little bit more, 10 seconds more than that. So the truth of the matter is, most women are, since we don't have heats, we do have ovulation, but we don't have heats. We're actually turned on all the time, but we dampen that
Well,
down.
you have the ability to be.
Yeah, no, we actually are, but we're just not we're not feeling it
Yeah.
because we are cutting off
Yeah.
for only appropriate times.
Yeah.
So it's like I tell women, your arousal's buried 200 feet under the basement level. When your man shows up to be interested in sex, you got to dig it out,
Yeah.
start the pulleys up. So if so, let's answer that question. What does it mean? So when I said I'd be ready for sex, I was literally like, the guy's like, well, does that mean I can just walk up to you, bend you over, and penetrate you? And I'm like, yeah, go for it. And so it really kind of starts to define, oh, I can have sex, just animal sex, whenever I want. I don't have to do anything to turn her on. I don't have to do romance. I don't have to do connection, intimacy, anything. And then typically the men are like, I don't know if I just like doing it like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So what's left when all of that stuff is out of the picture? It,
Right. Then it's like masturbation with
yeah.
somebody's body.
Yeah.
But it's great to watch a man come to that conclusion, because
Yeah.
all these fantasies that he has of how that is, the reality of it is that he starts to miss these other parts
Yeah.
and wonder what it is. So when I'm with a man who believes that keeping the fires stoked is a great thing to do, and both partners do that, meaning there's flirtation going on, there's intimacy going on, there's connection going on, both partners arousal is at a different quality. It's not just primal procreative now, we've stepped up. And so that level of arousal it takes different nerve paths in our body, creates different chemicals in our body than just rutting. If I call rutting, there's,
Yeah. And in a word, what we're talking about here is intimacy. Intimacy is a whole other ball game than just getting off.
yeah, absolutely. And, but there's so, I've had guys say, well, I give my wife intimacy. I bring her flowers regularly. No, no, that's romance is not intimacy. So that intimacy, which we'll of course do a podcast on because that's a deep dive into
Yeah.
something, but romance, affection, laughter, good conversation, all of those things go into, what I consider good sex.
Yeah. Presence and attention, just flirtation without, I mean, in my definition, flirtation is just goalless play. So
Yeah,
flirtation without trying to get to sex,
absolutely right. Yeah, and so, if a woman says, "Oh, well, I know when he wants sex," and I'm like, "Why is that?" And he says, "Well, because he'll come over and he'll tentatively touch my shoulder and kind of start to rub my back." And she's like, "Sigh." Really? Oh my god, seriously?
Yeah.
Or, the prelude is always, something that, and, women have done this to men too. Like, there's a lot of culpability on women with the yes, no, maybe, the whole thing, like, I'm saying no, but I really mean yes. You got to figure out that code. Um, I'm not sure I really want to be there. I don't really know how to be aroused in myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for validation to be
Mm-hmm.
aroused.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of complexity there. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
when I teach women's classes, I'm teaching women how to be turned on their own, right? So if you're, as a woman, when I'm just turned on, I may live in a turned on arousal state. Is it easy to have sex over there without warm up? Yes. Is it great to have all the other stuff? Yes. Is there always time for the other stuff? No. If you want to sex 3 times a day, it's not an elaborate affair each time.
Yeah.
I'm not breaking out the incense and, getting into some yoga yab yum, thing. You save it for a weekend, where you get an hour and a half. But yeah. So quantity, if men could have sex whenever they wanted, they'd have an entirely different viewpoint. I think, at least the men that I've been with in my life, when that opportunity's there, have an entirely different experience after they get over the I got to have sex all the time and nobody will give it to me.
Yeah. And to say that a slightly different way, men would get more in contact with what they actually want, with what they're actually looking for.
Right. Yeah, but there's that old saying that men show love through sex if they're in a relationship, right? Men show love through sex, and women trade sex for love.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is true, which in a lot of regards it is, if a man's never known a different way than to express his affection for his partner than to have sex with her, then wow, just think the guy might actually want to be connected and cuddled. The guy might actually want to just have affection or just spend an evening kissing without ready. He may not want to have to perform, to still get affection or still get sexy talk or still get flirting. And so all of that pressure that's really there, I think, takes away so much from the quality of both male and female sexuality, that, doing that nice deep
Yep.
dive to find out, like, what is it you really want when you think you want sex?
Yep.
Is it always that you actually want intercourse? Maybe it's just a blowjob. Maybe it's just oral sex for her. And how come we can't separate this? Why is it that once we've had intercourse with somebody, it's the quote unquote natural evolution that's always the result? I think that's very limited.
Yeah. Yeah.
You think so too?
Yeah, absolutely.
You
and this connects to the work that we do with our guys in Tantra of the Sacred Warrior, and just the work that I know that both you and I do with men in all the different professional contexts, which is presence.
Yeah.
And it's certainly something that I'm still in the practice of, in my life and with my woman, but the idea of just really slowing down and being with what is. I find for me, I'll share on a personal level, when there's that impulse to kind of get somewhere, to get to sex or to get to orgasm, there's always something deeper underneath. There's some, for me personally, there's some emotional piece, like a blockage or a closure in my emotional system that actually wants to avoid intimacy, that actually wants to avoid slowing down and really being in the sensation of maybe really light touch, that, or just whatever kind of sensual touch or sensual connection or emotional connection. That impulse to get somewhere is me skipping over a whole lot of depth that I actually want, but that can be uncomfortable to let myself have.
Well, then enter in the energetic components of all this, the biological imperative is to ejaculate. Like I said, that's a primary directive, procreation. And when all that energy gets stored in that very small area of the body,
Mm-hmm.
in the genitals, it causes that need to the irritation to expel the energy. So that's normal, natural, that's how it is. Learning to expand that container, the ability to maintain or experience bigger pleasure,
Yeah.
takes a little bit of presence. It takes a little bit of work. It takes a little bit of slowing down. But what I've seen with men that I've had sex with is that, if I start into the, oh, they're like, oh, teach me tantra, right? Teach me something. It's like, okay. Even the way I'll just make love, it's like, I'm experimenting. You're orgasmic over your entire body.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hang out here on your collarbones.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing, if a man doesn't know what I do or anything about it, where he's like, okay, he keeps pushing my head or my hands down to his crotch, right? That's the first thing. Go down here. What? Like, I'm like, so you do know that I've had sex before. I do know you have a penis. I do know what you want me to do with that. Just so we're clear, that head pushing and hand pushing, you could use your words, but let's experiment with something else. And at first, they're super irritated by it because it's like, let's get to the quote unquote good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Touch me here now, do it like this now. Let's get to the intercourse part now, or the, ejaculation through oral sex now. And I find that, yes, they get frustrated with me, they'll get irritated with me. When we finally get to the orgasm, if I can get them to just kind of relax and chill, most of them are like, holy crap, that was the most mind blowing orgasm I've ever had in my freaking life. What the hell did you do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's called
Not to
more
mention how good
arousal.
it feels along the way.
Yeah, right. If they get out of their heads
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to go there now,
Yeah.
right? It's that idea that basically I've created arousal in their whole body. And now the orgasm is from a whole body perspective
Yeah.
versus just a small area of the body. But it is hard because that drive forward, even women will do that. Like a man will say, hey, I want to have, more foreplay with my woman, and she's keeps just saying, let's just have sex. Well,
Yeah.
she's avoiding intimacy.
Yeah.
She's worried about how long things are taking. There's a lot of reasons that people just go, and the biological drive to do that.
Yeah.
So stepping back to overcome that a little bit will
Yeah.
change that quality of sex.
Yeah. And there definitely is the biological imperative. And I know for me, and I know for a lot of guys that I've worked with, there's a lot wrapped up in it emotionally that comes down to intimacy stuff,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So just know, guys out there, that yeah, if you really were able to have all the sex you wanted, and I've worked with and coached some of the top PUA seduction gurus out there, who've had, like you're saying, like, more sex than any man could ever want, kind of on demand, tapped on demand. When they start coaching with me, and you're like, why would they coach with you? Well, because they have problems with intimacy, they have problems with
Yeah.
connection, and after a while, they get bored. I
Yeah.
mean, you only have so many women, you can only have so much sex when it actually becomes boring. And if you've never had, you're thinking, I want to get to that point. I understand you. I hear that. And you can bypass having to get bored and get to the good stuff. That's what we teach. That's
Yeah.
what Robert and I do when we help men explore that. Because when you're in a different space as a man, you're not leading from that desperation point.
Yeah.
Women will open to you in a completely different way.
Yeah. And it's what I hear you saying in a nutshell is deciding to do this work to expand your capacity before things get to a breakdown point for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And knowing that if, there is that thing, you're your own best lover, but that doesn't mean that, you're jerking off to porn. And that's not what I'm talking about when I'm saying your own best lover. But learning how to be your own best lover means that you translate all those qualities of the way you love yourself, have sex with yourself to somebody else. You're already ahead of the game, and it's pretty cool stuff. So, tip of the day. What do we want to give men to take away from this?
Um, I mean, I think something along the lines of the self pleasure exercise that we offer our men.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the difference between masturbation and self pleasuring, masturbation is you know how to get off and you're doing it relatively expediently, some visual usually, some fantasy usually. Whereas self pleasuring really is about using your hands on your whole body, exploring the areas of your body that can bring up pleasure. Like, who knew that you can have an orgasm on your collarbone? But of course, you can. You know, so if you slow everything down and you take time to actually touch yourself and appreciate the touch that the hands that's feeling your body and the body that's feeling the hand, when you first do that, it's a little confusing, and it might note that that's what it feels like when both people are doing each other. It feels that way. Now if you stop and you concentrate on your hand, and for those of you who are just listening, I'm waving my hands frantically in the air. If you and if you haven't watched us, you might you might actually watch us on YouTube so you can see all these demos. But my hand is touching my arm, and as I'm touching my arm, I can decide to be the arm or I can decide to be the hand, or the hand touching or the arm being touched. When you start to break that down and you can focus only on the hand feeling the arm or the arm feeling the hand, you start to dive into subtleties that women live in all the time. And when you learn how to dive into those subtleties on your own body, when you touch somebody else, it's unbelievably so freaking different.
It can create so much more depth in the experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you start to appreciate your own body so much more.
Yeah.
You start to experience your own pleasure so much more. So you can drag arousal if you're erect and you want to experience, you're like, well, I just feel turned on in my crotch. If you grab your erection and then run your hand from your erection up your stomach, bring that energy, move that feeling, you can actually disperse that arousal throughout your entire body. And when your whole body's turned on, like when you're at your 9.9 right before you ejaculate, that excruciating moment of, the mixture of pain and pleasure kind of, you can actually like bring that to your entire body. And when you do that, she feels it. She can feel your body in that experience, which heightens her arousal like 1,000-fold.
Mm-hmm.
And you're feeling exquisite. Every touch is like orgasmic. It becomes an amazing thing. This is not fantasy. I've taught thousands of men how to do this, so it's not some kooky fantasy of how it can be. And I can tell you that then your quantity of what you think you need changes too, because you're getting enriched in so many other ways. It's not just rutting that you could just that's a one feeling, one trick pony kind of thing. It's actually like nourishing your soul, which sounds can sound woo woo, but it's not. When you know it, you feel it. It's crazy town. Your soul, every nerve ending in your body, your hormone panel changes, your testosterone levels get reignited. Everything is just what things taste like, smell like, what you're seeing is just unbelievable. That's all I got to say about that.
and with that,
we'll see you later.
Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you next time.